Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
Hello, it's Zoe, and boy, are we in for a treat today. I just absolutely love this conversation. My guest today is Mykel Dixon. He is a special friend, somebody I've known for a number of years now, and I have a huge admiration for him because of his imagination. He is a keynote speaker. He's a wonderful speaker. He's a performer. He's a musician. He's a complete dynamo. He is an author. His latest book, Everyday Creative, won Best Leadership Book of the Year at the Australian Business Book Awards in 2022. We talk about how to bring creativity to life, how to access the life force that drives all creative energy. It is a passionate, wide-ranging, fabulous conversation. And without further ado, here is Mykel. Well, all the way from Melbourne, we have the sexy, the fabulous, the fantastic, the fantabulous Mykel Dixon. Welcome to the show.
Get out of town. Are you kidding me? Zoe, I appreciate that. I've never had anyone open with the sexy, so this is already the best podcast I've ever done.
And I've never had a guest plug their own applause in the background. So
what do you mean that wasn't me? That's all the fans that you've brought along in the studio.
I have sound effect jealousy completely right now. Oh my goodness.
It's great.
I'm glad we could tee this up.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Me.
Too bad nobody else can see us. All they're going to do is get a dodgy screenshot at the end. But we're talking about creativity and innovation, and creativity is your jam. You have been a creative since probably you screamed and crawled into the world. Can you tell us how you came to be such a well-known expert on creativity? Where did you originate from, Mr. Dixon?
That's a good question, and even I'll answer before the origin story, maybe how I came to be known, and it's a funny thing to think about, but known for creativity is to always be making courageous, creative decisions. So I think even the way that I approach the work that I do in this capacity, working with teams and leaders and organizations, even when I was running events, even when I was a community manager, even when I owned a bar in Cambodia, et cetera, it's just always doing something creatively as opposed to doing what you think you are supposed to do or what the last person did or what is expected of you. So that's probably how I came to be known for it. My origin story is, or how I ended up following this path of creativity. I mean, I was a regular everyday kid like most of us. I grew up in little old Adelaide over there in South Australia. We travelled around a bit. I got kicked out of a few schools. I played music very young. I loved performing. I had a very supportive mother and father, but certainly my mother was very supportive around valuing the arts, creativity, poetry, reflections. If I didn't feel like going to school because I wanted to create something, she'd say, no problem. And I think that really set the tone for me valuing it. But then I would say that I had some critical or some powerful mentors or guides or, human lighthouses along the way that just shone brighter than everything else. And I thought, I want to be like that person. That's the life I want. One in particular was my piano teacher throughout all my teens. It wasn't just music for him, it was a lifestyle. And that just lit me up in a way that nothing else really did. And so then that set me on the course to where we are now.
So when you described the impact of your piano teacher, you talked about him, it was the different lifestyle that he had, or it was not just about the music, it was about the lifestyle. For you, what sparked in you? Was it the fact that it was a different thing? Like it was doing something different, counterculture or counter norm. Is that what creativity means for you? Is that what sparked the interest in doing different for you?
I think so. I think behind that for me is this idea of freedom and liberation. I mean, it's funny, we talked just before going live on air and we said, maybe we can cover a few things. Creativity needs a little structure, right? And I loved the freedom that these people had, the way they approached their life. to cross at the lights. I'm going to cross the road where I want. I'm not going to eat what they tell me. I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to stay up later than everyone else. I'm going to follow what moves me. I'm not going to follow what I'm told. And that's just always really attracted me. There's something about that I've loved, and like liberating others from these self-imposed a lot of the time constraints, or from these institutional constraints or these cultural constraints or whatever it is. I'm very attracted to people that carve their own path, that say, here's convention, maybe there's another way of doing it. And that to me, it's just something that I'm very interested in. I'm very compelled by. But what's interesting, why I guess I brought that up, is you need the convention in the first place. Like, if there's nothing to be liberated from, then maybe that energy is not the same. So it's not to say that it's better or worse or anything. It's just to say I love the idea of constraint and then freedom. There's something about that movement or that process that really excites me.
I was talking to a leader about this very thing today, where we were talking about using powerful questions as part of a creative thinking process, and using the starting point, what if, and then putting constraints around the rest of the sentence. What if we had to do this with half the time? So that constriction liberated ideas. It forces the energy through a different channel, I think, which is, I suspect, is what you're talking about there. Those constraints and boundaries, when we put pressure on them, push the desire for progress, innovation, a newness, freedom into a different bulge. I've got this picture of like an amoeba getting squished for some reason. That's sort of what's coming to my mind. I'm gesticulating like pressure and squeezing. So that's the first thing that comes up for me around creativity. And the other thing that comes up to me as you're talking about, I'm going to cross the road wherever I want. And it's like, well, some constraints are actually probably pretty useful from having a healthy civilization. And I think that's part of the challenge for leaders too, is knowing which constraints that are useful and have some parts of wisdom to them, and which ones can you play around with. You do a lot of work with corporates now, corporate teams, etc. How do you help them navigate what to keep and what to throw out, or is it all fair game?
I think, currently it's all fair game. Everything's been thrown up in the air after the last couple of years. But it is interesting. I like that maybe where we're going to go with this, because, we do need some structure. Yeah, if we're talking about society, we're talking about civilization, we're talking about citizens, how we relate to one another. There needs to be some agreed upon principles or values so that we can all live and survive together. That would be same in an organizational context. There are certain things it's like, hey, we've got to do this so that we can all get along. The interesting challenge is where that line is and how it moves and how it can creep in. And one agreed upon principle or value can then become a process, can then become best practice, can then become an ideology, can then become a constraint. And what started as, hey, look, it's safer if we all cross the road here, to use that metaphor, can then become, you're fined if you ever choose to cross the road anywhere else. Can then become, actually, you know what? It's not just the road, it's the park. You're also not allowed to step on the grass. Actually, it's not only the grass. You're not allowed to leave your house between 3 and 4. Actually, it's not. And then we forget the original thing was actually to keep people safe. And it's like, oh yeah. So it's got to be, I guess, living. These constraints have to be living and evolving with us. We're getting very philosophical. We're only like 2 minutes into this.
Yeah, I'm thinking, wow, creativity is really an antidote to autocracy. That's amazing.
There we go. Well, and I think even building on from that idea is, we will have to arrive at it at some point in this conversation. But the biggest block that I've found that people have, and this is true for myself, but of all the people I've worked with, whether they're creatives themselves or they label themselves creatives, whether they work in an accounting firm or whether they're a keynote speaker or whether they're in a design agent, whatever it is, it's the story we tell ourselves about our own creative capacity or capability that defines how creative we are. It's the narrative, the internal narrative. It's our identity. It's who we are for ourselves that actually shapes everything. So you can do creative workshops, you can read books, you can da-da-da-da-da. If it's all over the top of a story that you're not creative, that your sister was the creative one, or that you're just not, you just don't think outside the box like others, it will make no difference. And going back to this conversation around, rules or regulations or systems or processes, sometimes they can creep in and start unknowingly start to shape our own internal narrative. And so we've got to have an awareness of, well, hang on, why do I think that way? Why have I been telling myself like that? Is that because it's true, or is that because it's, I've been influenced by a particular thing? Or, I do a lot of work with financial institutions or accountants or pharmacists, and you talk to them. I say, what's the stereotypical story? What's the narrative that you're up against? I remember in a room full of 300 pharmacists, and they had white coats on because they were doing a photo shoot. And the guy said, I remember once someone said to me, it'd be more fun reading the phone book than hanging out with a bunch of pharmacists. And I said, how does that make you feel? He said, horrible. And I asked the room, how does it make it? And everyone went, it's horrible. Are you okay with that? Because inside of that context, inside of that story, it must be very hard to do anything creative. It must be very hard to do anything alive or risky or bold or audacious or unexpected or spontaneous. And they're like, yeah, it is. But would you say that you as an individual outside of the context of being a pharmacist, are there moments you've been spontaneous? Are there moments yeah, there are. Well, then we need to change the narrative. We need to change the story of who you are and be aware of these constraints that creep in on the edges where our identity it's shaped by your job description, your job title, your stature, your position in life, where you live, your neighborhood. All of these things might be influencing us in our creativity more than we realize.
I agree with you that if our identity doesn't match up with our intention, then we've got no hope of making progress. And it's true for habits as well as it is for any other endeavor, including creativity. I want to check an assumption that I've got in why leaders find it hard to be creative or why else there is resistance, not only identity. And one of the assumptions I've got is that creativity requires a different kind of energy. And if I fine-tune that thought a little bit, perhaps it's a belief. I'm not sure if it's a belief or a truth. Creativity requires more energy than following the norm. And this is maybe one of the reasons why people shy away from doing it. So the reason I think that this might be a belief as opposed to a truth, or maybe it is a truth, is when I'm talking to leaders and I'm encouraging them to try new things, I get a sense from them that there's like this burden associated with that because there's risk involved and it requires a whole bunch of energy. Maybe it's courage energy that they may not necessarily have had. What's your experience around that? Is it a truth that I've got there, or is it a false belief? What is the nature of energy and strain when it comes to creativity?
I think energy is the best way of thinking about what creativity is. Because how I define it, another really important piece for us, I think, as leaders moving forward, and just as humans, is we need to redefine creativity. We need to reclaim it and give it a new definition. It's not just the arts, it's not theatre, it's not blah, 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 decoration or entertainment. It's actually fundamental, complex problem solving, critical thinking, empathy, envisioning new futures, blah, 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 blah. It's in everything, and it's in everyone. So I think of it as a life force. I think the universe itself is creative. So you've seen these great little metaphors of there's concrete, and then sure enough, that tiniest little crack in the concrete, there's a daisy that pops out. There's just that little green shoot that finds a way. It's somehow found some soil. Life has a way of finding fertility and growing. It's abundant. It wants to be in flow. Life is movement. Stagnant is death. When something is stagnant, when something is not moving, when there's no force or when there's no momentum, when inertia is there, life ceases to exist, or life moves on and goes somewhere else where it is fertile. And so when thinking about, you were saying leaders, when they go, that sounds like, that's hard, I would assert that they're out of practice in recognizing that the energy, the momentum, the flow that they could be in, that's available to them is probably, it's just over the fence. It's just they need a taste of it again to realize it actually fuels you. It energizes you. It lights you up. It gives you the juice, the mojo that you're looking for. And maybe a lot of the time as leaders, we're on autopilot and we're just in execution mode. We're moving the calendar blocks around in 15-minute increments and we're just getting through the day, as opposed to riding momentum. Well, I mean, we don't allow momentum. If you look at the modern world, you could have a great meeting. Sorry, guys, we're going to have to wrap in 15 because I've got a hard stop at 5. Yeah, but What if something's going to happen at 5:01? What if like the thing we've been looking for as an organization happens at 5:06 and we were just getting there? We were about to tap into it. But guys, I got a hard stop. Why? Because I've got to go and sit in another meeting and listen to a whole bunch of other reports that are dead and stagnant. They're not living. They're not alive. They're not evolving. So, I mean, I think if we could reclaim this, which opens up a Pandora's box of all kinds of things that we need to look at changing in our work life and our routines and the way we go about things. That energy, I think organization, it would be night and day with how they run now or people's lived experience at work. And we talk about well-being and all these kind of things now. It would be so different if we weren't bound by, again, these constraints of 9 to 5, or let's be honest, 7 to 7, and we've got 30-minute Zoom meetings and team meetings, and we've got 2-hour, once a month, we have the reporting meeting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much more available to us on the other side of these constraints that we've just taken, we've rolled with them, we had to do things, we just accepted them. But then to stop and go, hang on, do they serve us? Are we getting the most out of our working experience that we could be, or are we just on autopilot? Is it a lot of defaults that we're just used to and it's just convenient? You know what I mean? It's just easy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this, right? So I'm thinking about how those structures are convenient, they're familiar, they're comfortable, and there's a certain momentum that we can get from having those structures, etc. And then the dangerous idea of liberating creative freedom into all of that creates chaos in some ways, I'm guessing. But maybe it's not chaos that happens. Maybe it is a brand new way of thinking and being and doing. So I want to bring this to brass tacks. So, we've got leaders listening and they're thinking, they're driving their car, they're working out, they're doing the dishes, whatever they're doing, they're going, get this guy, he's full of energy. Yeah. It sounds inspiring. How is this going to help me tomorrow when I go into the office? What can I do to bring this kernel of life force into my organization? What does this actually mean in a practical term, in a practical way? What can I do? What does that look like?
Before we can even do that, we have to feel it again. People have to feel it. You can't see because it's a podcast, but behind me I have a vintage keyboard on one side. I actually have the piano that I first ever learned to play on when I was 5 years old. It's behind me. And just having them close to me. I don't get to play as much as I used to, but I'll be in the middle of meetings or I'll finish just at the end of a day, a lot of Zoom masterclasses, sessions online. I'll turn around and play for 2 minutes and then suddenly it's 15 minutes. And I'm energized. I'm 17 again. I'm full of life. Or even in the kitchen with the kids and things are a bit, and we'll put on, why don't I listen to music right now? I'll just put on a song. And then instantly I'm reconnected. That's right. This feeling, this energy, this vibe, this vitality, it comes back. That place, we need to make more space for that, to have more of those little moments across a day. And then the continuity between them will start to inform and shape, hang on, there's something going on here. Unless we're reconnecting to that emotional sensibilities of it, like if we're really in the embodied awareness of creativity or of what brings us alive, essentially, you could say, what just lights us up. Unless we're connected to that and feeling that, we'll just go straight back to that other linear, rational, logical, analytical brain. And so we'll go, okay, we need to bring more of this into the office. Okay, look, I think the most important thing for us to do would be maybe we do 15 minutes at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. No, because you're coming at it from the same mindset, the same brain. And it's even moving from mindset into body set. I just made that up, but whatever. We need to everyone can have an experience of it. And music is a great tool for me, but it could be anything for you where there's something that does light you up. We've all got something and it's a trigger. And you switch it and you're like, oh, God, instantly your mood is different. Instantly you're thinking about things and you're having ideas and it's like, whoa, God, it could be the shower for you. You know what I mean? Like but we need to connect to that more before we even make any strategic decisions about how we might want to integrate it into our workplace. And then what I would say to build on that, because I'm not trying to, get out of this question, would be if we do that more and more, what you'll know to do will present itself. It will show up like, you know what, I really need more of this. I want this. I'm going to make the time for this. Actually, this feels important to me. Things will come to you the more connected you are to that place. And it seems trite or it seems too easy, but making 5 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day or 5 times of 3 minutes a day, whatever it is, where you are reconnecting to what brings you alive is not easy in this day and age. It sounds like it is.
It sounds like accessing flow state to me. That's what it sounds like. Is that what you're describing? Getting into that peak performance where you're completely absorbed in the moment. And for some of us, that might be music. For some of us, it might be baking or writing. For me, it's writing. I can get into that place of absorption and flow through writing. For others, it might be gardening. That's what you're talking about, right? Getting into that.
Absolutely. And flow's like almost the next phase. But just walking outside and putting your bare feet on the grass, just putting on a track before you've even hit that flow state, just doing that little pattern disruptor that anchors you back to that thing that brings you alive, that reminds you, lifts you out of the quagmire, the mud, the murky, the endless emails, the whatever we're in. Because we will not solve, hey, let's go to Einstein. I mean, he's the guru, right? We will not solve whatever, I'll bastardize his quote, any challenge or whatever with the same level of consciousness than where it was created. And that quote actually gets misquoted even more than I just misquoted it. A lot of people, they say a problem won't be solved with the same level of thinking. But it's not thinking. The original quote is consciousness. And consciousness is very different to thinking. Consciousness is a full body awareness. It is perceiving the world around you and accessing all the different sensibilities that you have to process that information. It's not just your brain. Your brain's like one little part, one little piece, one very small piece. So he's talking about opening our consciousness, opening up our whole bodies to access the information that's coming into us.
I think that's a really powerful insight in that creativity is an embodied experience. And it's a life force experience. And I think this is what I commonly see too, is that so many of us are disconnected from our body. We're just these brains walking around on this appendage of bones and water, as opposed to fully experiencing all of who we are, connecting with our emotions, connecting with our senses, and using those inputs and outputs as genuine experiences in themselves that are valid and useful for the work that we're doing. So that we're not just tapping at a computer. We are a full human in a full environment. And that sort of systemic approach to understanding our place in the world is super important. And I love that you raise consciousness as an important element to this. Yeah. So I'm thinking about the person who's washing their dishes, swatting at their kids or their cat in the background. How can they start to bring more consciousness to those daily experiences?
Go to the source. And again, the source is country. The source is nature. The source is the sunrise. The source is music or art. Art is so powerful. There's a tribe in Peru called the Quechuan, and they have a saying that wisdom is encoded in beauty. So for tens of thousands of years, they've talked about, if you look at a flower, the intricacies of metamorphosis, that process, all the physics, chemistry, how a stream comes down from the mountains and all these tributaries and then ends up in the sea, and all the processes that need to take place so we've got rain so that we can drink. All of these things are beautiful. They're elegant. They're optimized. They're all the wonderful things. But they're absolutely gorgeous. Go and get reconnected to that. You, Zoe, are the adventurer. You're out there hiking, trekking, taking teams out there. I can only imagine how you feel the moment you tie up those boots and then you start walking. It's just bang. You are connected. You are straight back into, I'm home. There's a bigger conversation that we actually live inside of, but we just get trapped in these tiny little conversations of our day-to-day and our work, and we think that that's really important and really stressful. But then we need to step out. We need to get back to the source. There's a really interesting thing. You listen to any Indigenous person in this country, any First Nations person, and they will always say, oh, yeah, I was feeling a bit funky. I just need to get back on country. I needed to get back on country. And that can be dismissed a lot by people that don't understand what they mean by that. But they mean, I need to get back to the source. of where I come from, of the same elements that I was born into. I need to be refueled by the trees, by the soil, by the sky, by, my country again, and then come back. We can do that too.
We can. So tying in a few of your ideas here. So big views, big insights is what I believe in and embody in terms of leadership. That's getting out into big spaces and big horizons. The science backs it up. That sense of awe creates a sense of connection to the entire universe, which liberates creative thinking and ideas. So definitely that's something that is essential to A, creativity, and B, that sense of wonderment. That's all kind of tied in together. And coming back to what you were saying earlier, that little micro triggers of how to connect to that. So being an outdoorsy person, yeah, I would love to spend weeks and weeks out under the stars, and I have bills to pay, so that doesn't happen at the moment. The way that I capture that is, as you said, that life force is in nature and nature is in life force. I have plants around my house, and that's how I do micro connection to that life force is every day. I pay attention. I'm looking at one right now, my beautiful plant that's growing here. And by connecting and observing that plant and just being present with that plant takes me there right away. It takes me to the cosmos, to the universe, to nature, etc. And that's one way that I anchor myself throughout the day is I check in with my plants, and that gives me the same kind of ma as standing on top of a mountain or being at the coast and seeing the ocean horizon. And I think we can all do that, whether it's plants or whether it's a piano or whether it's art. I love that quote that you said, though, that there is wisdom in beauty. That is really incredibly powerful. And in fact, in terms of encouraging people listening to think about how can I get some of this juice, this life force, this energy, this creative force, if we say, pay attention to what's beautiful for you, that's really helpful. And it's such a tonic for the soul just to think about that.
Well, it is. It's like, I was telling my kid this morning about, he was asking me about how trees grow, and we got into this big conversation around flowers are so attractive to attract the bees. So they make them really beautiful to attract the bees. That's not an accident. The same is true for everything. That's their whole, their whole point is wisdom is encoded in beauty. Go look at something beautiful. It's not superficial and trite. There is depth to it. There is hundreds of millions of years of evolution to it. There's whatever. There is a reason, a purpose behind it, which is absolutely magnificent. The beauty, we're drawn to it. So having those micro moments, like you said, and I was even going to bring it back to the small micro things you can do in a creative sense. Read some fiction. I mean, if you're a leader, I'm going to assume you read a whole lot of nonfiction, and you're always, checking out articles, HBR and LinkedIn and whatever else. I dare you to go and get a fiction book. I dare you to go and get a children's book. Go to a library and find Asterix or Tintin, or whatever, just things that maybe you had as a kid, and notice how it makes you feel when you open it up again and go, all these things will come back to you. I promise you that you think, wow, these were elements in my life. I had this stuff.
I love that you raised this as an issue because I'm about to launch my very first novel.
There you go.
So moving from writing nonfiction to writing fiction was a liberating process. And it's also re-sparked my interest in reading fiction. I studied English literature at university, and so I was always immersed in story. But they beat the passion out of you at university because you have to dissect all the tropes and mechanisms behind it. I couldn't read a novel for 5 years. And then coming back to the joy of story is amazing.
Well, tens of thousands of years of cultures all around the world. How do they transfer their knowledge? How do they transfer wisdom? In story. You go to the Amazon and you've got shaman that have story around what the plants have told them. You have pharmaceutical companies going to these shamans saying, how did you know that herb needed to be heated to that particular degree Celsius mixed with that root and that leaf, but only the leaf once it was almost about to fall off the tree? And the shaman said that the plant told me. It's a story that we've known for a long time. Oh, yes, savage, silly little traditional man doesn't really know what he's talking about. No, this is information that's been passed down through story. It lands with us. It stays with us. It's not trivial. And the story of, the constellation, if you look at all the different star, constellations or astronomy, I should say, for all kinds of cultures, they're exactly the same as what science has discovered. It's just that the Milky Way in our country is the emu. It's the great emu in the sky. But it's the river of stars. It's all the same. It's been transferred in story. And so fiction is powerful. It lingers with us. And how many business storytelling gurus are there out there in the world teaching leaders, hey, story is really the key. You need to tell great stories. There's a reason for that. Look, we need the rational brain. We need logical. We need systems. We need processes. Absolutely. So does nature. But this pendulum has swung over the last 150 years or probably more so far in one direction. And we're starting to swing ourselves back to the center. And we've still got a long way to go. And we've got a bit of baggage. But the way to get back to the center is not by thinking or by strategizing or by coming up with some 6-point plan that you're going to implement with your team before the next quarter. It's by reconnecting to the source, the natural world, by reconnecting to art, by things that move you, that affect you emotionally. You start crying in a commercial. Good. That's a good thing. What is it? It's that. We need to bring that feeling back. And from that place, then I think we really do get to, we can then having conversations with our teams, with our organization, with our customers about a world that looks radically different to right now, where we all have a new set of agreed principles where maybe, hey, we're not cutting that meeting off at 5. We're actually allowing 5:06 to come to us, and we're starting to see the benefits and ride the momentum that happens with that, that's what excites me.
So I want to check in on something, because what I'm feeling from you and hearing from you is this whole idea about liberating the creative spirit, is liberating life force in the people around you. When you think about your vision for the ideal future of humans, because I'm imagining that's the size of your vision, what do you see? What is the vision that you're in service to?
I think it is somewhat of a return to how things have been before, kind of Western thinking came and took over. There's a great book called Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta.
What's it called? Sand Talk?
Sand Talk. Yeah.
Sand Talk.
Check it
okay.
out. He's an Indigenous Australian author, incredible thinker, but he shares a lot of great stuff about Indigenous wisdom in this country and what we can learn from it. But the tagline, I think, is what I love most, which is Indigenous wisdom will save the world. It really will. And so if I think about a future, it's less about leaving behind what wasn't moving forward. And, there's always this, we've got to get to that next better place, and more about, well, hang on, how do we live in this beautifully integrated, this sustainable, this organic, authentic freedom of expression, where we're just in the discovery. What I love about thinking about the future is not some utopian paradise where we're running around, naked, eating plums off of trees and whatever else.
Though that could be fun.
That would be amazing. That's my annual offsite retreat for leaders, if anyone's interested. But it's what I love thinking about is, I don't know what it's going to be. Let's create it. I kind of like the idea of, how do I say this? I'm excited by what might happen if more people can remember their full self-expression and can create organizations and systems and countries and nations and a global community where we are free to express ourselves and create. And I have no idea what would be possible if that happened. I think we're a long way from that, to be honest. My little view of the future, I feel, is kind of limited. But what inspires me about the future is thinking, gosh, imagine what would be possible. I run a lot of events and festivals and stuff like that, and I love getting people to places where they're free. They're free to create and express themselves. And even what happens in these things, whether it's a 2-day offsite or 1-day event or a week-long retreat or whatever, the magic that unfolds, it's like we did not anticipate that. We could not have planned for that. We could have, for 3 years, we could have strategized about how we can get to this perfect place, but something happens when people come together in the right space and they things unlock for them and they follow that momentum and they allow things to happen, they lean in, that it's like, wow, this is next level. And then you never forget that, and it becomes like a line in the sand.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, that's my vision.
That's a great
vision. I
don't
have one.
Mike, this has been really fabulous. I have really enjoyed your energy, and that whole association of creativity and energy and life force has been very moving for me today, and I've really enjoyed that immensely. And sliding into that vision of us returning to our whole selves and being fully self-expressed is a vision and a mission worthy of all of our energy. So thank you so much for everything you've brought to the podcast as well as to the world. I so appreciate you and the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you.
That's a beautiful way to finish. I'm so grateful to you too, Zoe, because we have a history. And for listeners out there, when we met, you were so generous and so thoughtful in helping me make sense of a world that I wasn't familiar with. And I think you were somewhat of an outlier too in the way that you went about things. And I still remember that there was one time you got up on stage in this particular program we were in. It was just so real and so raw, and you were just authentically you, and it stood out like it was neon. And I still remember thinking that I want more of that. Whatever this whole business world thing is, I don't know about that other stuff, but that presence, that ability to just be so there was stunning to me. It had a really, really deep impact on me. And so I am grateful to you. And it's such a thrill to be invited on your wonderful podcast. And I can only imagine the kind of impact that you're having with these beautiful listeners of this podcast. It makes me think that they feel like this makes me feel.
Woohoo!
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You got to end with MJ.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's terrific.
He's just so good. Can you separate the man from the music?
I wrote an article about that, or maybe it was a LinkedIn post. I think you have to.
I think you have to. But you know what? This goes into, I've been doing a lot on like inclusion and our unconscious bias recently. But then you've got R. Kelly. Now, I don't like R. Kelly's music as much, if at all. But he did a lot of very nasty things. And so I'm like, oh, no, you know, write off his music as well. But I love Michael Jackson's music. So my bias is, well, maybe we can make a little allowance. Bill Cosby, I'm like, I don't know if you can separate the art from the artist. Like, Bill Cosby needs to go to jail because the Cosby Show, I love the Cosby Show, but I don't love it as much as Michael Jackson's music. So I'm kind of like, oof. I'm changing the rules for myself.
Well, I think, yeah, the art can be tainted by the artist, for sure. And in fact, it's one of the things I talk about in my new novel coming out.
Yay.
Is that very question is, can you separate the man from his deeds?
Yeah.
Does the poison of the man affect the good deed that they did?
Wow. This is great, Zoe. I'm so excited for you.
I'm
well
excited
done.
too. Yeah. Well, I haven't clicked end record, so probably we need to end this show.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Mike. And
pleasure.
It's been so wonderful. Thank you for everybody I'm glad you've tuned in to listen to me and Mike. It's been great. Thanks.
Oh, this is still going. Oh, you're still recording. I didn't realize.
How funny was that outtake at the end? I kept trying to go and end the call, and then we kept having amazing conversation. So that was really super fun. I guess for me, the big takeaway from talking with Mykel was just a rekindling, a reconnection to that life force, that creative energy, and the desire to be in flow, the desire to connect with all that is. And that's what we can bring, that magic, that spark, that energy we can bring to our everyday activities, to our work, to everything that we do. And like Mykel says, if we can encourage people to be fully self-expressed and authentic and genuine, how the world might change, how our work might change, how our everyday might change. And I think that's pretty exciting and energizing, to be honest. So that was really fabulous. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I have given all of my amplifiers a copy of his latest book, Everyday Creative, as part of their program. And we've got Mykel coming along as a special guest to one of our webinars for amplifiers. It's one of the things I do with my high-level leadership program, is that we have amazing conversations, deep insights, in order to expand our ability to have an impact. And if that sounds like a community that you are ready and wanting to find, then have a look at our program on zoerouth.com. Click programs, click amplifiers. Would love to have your big thinking, your creative energy contribute to the whole. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.